This video is not made for kids. It's for older fans and adults of the Thomas and Friends franchise. Now go enjoy the fucking video, my boys. How the fuck did he do that? It had only been a while ever since Edward was brought out of the shed. The old engine was happy to be back in service, and took passengers and goods all. At this time, the railway had brought more engines on loan to help out with the work, but none of them really was worse than one engine in particular. 98462 was one of these loaned engines, the most rudest to Edward especially. He was in a type of gang with a few other engines. Their names were 87546, Croven, Greedy, Alfred, and Afton. They all talked a lot and made plans about bullying the others, which included Edward, Henry, and sometimes even Thomas. However, some would say that these 6 loaned engines would get what's coming to them, especially 98462. One evening, Edward had returned to the shed after his last passenger train. As he entered the shed, 98462 sneered at him. "So you finally managed to make it out of the station, old Edward," he said smugly. "I've never known an engine like you would have been so useless. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot of complaints from the passengers tomorrow. You must have been behind schedule all day." The other lone engines that were nearby in the shed also sniggered at this. Edward, however, just smiled. "Well, I was actually right on time, you know. I'm happy to be useful again." 98462 felt quite annoyed. He wasn't getting the reaction he was hoping for. "Oh, are you so sure now?" he said. I guess I'll be the one to judge that tomorrow." "Say what you like," said Edward, "but mark my words, the passengers like me, and I will always be a useful engine from now for many years to come," I said. And he puffed back further into the shed to ignore what 98462 and the others had to say. 98462, failing to get the reaction he wanted out of Edward, reluctantly fell asleep. With Edward now back in service, this meant that he, 98462, and another lone engine would be running the passenger services all around the island. Edward was quite hesitant as he knew he would be seeing 98462 along with the more lone engines more often. But he did his best to not let 98462 or the other engines to bother him. But as the weeks passed, Edward began to feel himself getting worn out. One engine in particular noticed this, and he became concerned. Later that day, Edward was sitting in a siding with a goods train that looked a bit heavier than usual. He was just about to leave when another engine came up beside him. "Hello, Edward," he said. Hello, Murdoch. Been a while since I last seen you." "Yes," Murdoch replied. "I'm concerned, though. You're pulling a lot more trucks than usual. Or at least you're starting to, I suppose. Are you sure you're alright?" "Oh, trust me, I'm okay, Murdoch," Edward reassured. But deep down, he knew that his trains were getting heavier and heavier as the days went on, but Edward just didn't know what was wrong. He didn't know if his age was starting to catch up onto him, or if his trains really were just getting heavier. Whenever Murdoch would try and lend Edward a hand, he would simply stop and say, "No, thank you. We have our own work to do. It wouldn't be fair if you helped me. That would be pushing more work onto your buffers." And he would simply go back to work. Murdoch felt worried, but thought it best to just stay out of it. However, while they had been talking, they hadn't noticed a certain engine watching from far behind, who had now started to form a plan. A week later from that day, Edward was shunting a train from 98462 into the station platform. "All good, Edward. Now we can go and fetch your train," he said. And Edward departed to find the trucks for his train. When Edward found the trucks for his train, he shunted them into place on the track beside 98462's train. You're a bit low on water, Edward. We'll leave the trucks here and go find a water tower to refill it." Edward was pleased at the chance to be getting a rest, and he hurried off to find a water tower. As Edward was leaving, 98462 came backing into the station to take his train. He was still salty over what happened in the shed. But Edward, there must be some way to get him out of service, he said as he coupled up to his train. The driver fastened the coupling between 98462 and his train. He was a bit early, so he had a few minutes to spare to wait. As he did, he looked over to the track and saw Edward's train. An idea then went up into 98462's funnel, pulled off with his train, but not just with his. By the time Edward came back, his train was gone. He was very confused. "That's odd," he said. "I should have left my train here. And 98462's train is gone too." "Well, there's nothing that we can write about it now," said his driver. "We'll just go shunt in the yard for now," he said. Edward was quite disappointed, but knew it wasn't right to argue. About 2 hours later, Edward was shunting the coaches for the express for 98462 into the station. He then left to go and find some other trucks for another train he had to take. He still had the same thought on his mind. Where did his trucks go from earlier? And if someone took them, who had? Edward didn't think about it too much though, as he shunted his train onto the other siding. He then left to go find a turntable so he can get turned around. As he did, 98462 came into the yard to collect his coaches, and Edward left to go find a turntable. By the time Edward came back again, his trucks were gone. "This is outrageous," said Edward. He just could not understand where his trucks were going. Until Edward looked over to find Murdoch back next to him on the siding. "Edward, 98462, he's the one who's been taking your trains." Edward felt furious. "Oh dear, that 98462. We have to go tell the Fat Controller. Surely he will." "No," interrupted Edward. It's no use putting up with him. It's best that I just get on with my jobs, he said as he puffed away. Murdoch, however, didn't. And so, he decided to take matters into his own hands at some point. About 2 weeks later, 98462 was shunting some coaches for his Royal Express service into the station. On the track next to him, he saw some vans for Edward. Perfect. Rhode Island still hasn't learned his lesson, he thought. See, Edward always parks his coaches and 98462 trains next to each other, where a jump was important to head switch each other on to each line. So, this made it very easy for 98462 to sneak taking Edward's trains as well as his own. 98462 sniggered. He thought he'd gotten away with it again. When suddenly, "And what do you think you're doing?" a voice said as Edward and Murdoch puffed up in front of 98462. The Fat Controller poked his head out of Edward's cab window. "And just what do you think you're doing, 98462? I'm just taking my train, sir," 98462 replied nervously. "Oh, really? And that involves taking Edward's trains as well as your own?" 98462 thought you knew better. "I was going to make you a primary express engine, but I'm not sure anymore. Now you will go back to your shed and stay there until I say you can come out." Edward and Murdoch both backed up so 98462 could use the points and get out. He looked crossly towards Edward as he puffed away. Then Edward turned back to Murdoch. "Thank you, Murdoch," Edward said. "You're all right. Maybe I should have spoke up about it." "Well, that's okay," said Murdoch. "We're friends, and friends always look out for each other." Edward smiled. For once, he believed that he wouldn't be all alone with a bunch of rude engines, and was thankful for someone who dug it out with him.